Good afternoon. Doing another video for Richard. This is a dedication channel for Richard, and it is also Schmickel's channel, my dog's. I was just thinking today about how the word dead is a misleading word when people leave us from the physical world, from their physical body. And when we say he's dead, yes and no. Yes, that physical body is dead, but the soul is more alive, probably far more alive than any time that they were living here in the physical existence. And I've been thinking about that, like when when we say someone is dead, it every time I hear it, the word dead, it just conveys the wrong. It's just wrong, because when we think dead, we think that's it, that's the end, and there's no more of that person at all, and it's wrong. It's not true. I wish that there was a different word, because it does convey this idea that they no longer exist at all, and I know in my heart and in my soul that that is just not true. The physical body is left behind, just like getting out of an old pair of clothes that you leave behind. Richard used to use the reference of being in our spacesuit. While we're here in this physical existence, we need our physical spacesuit to exist in the physical material world, but it's not who we are. And I think that's important for people who have lost their beloved souls, whether husband or wife or even your pet. The physical body, yes, that is no more, but their soul lives on. And I know we can understand that it's to some degree on an intellectual level, but I am beginning to experience it for real after Richard left. I know that he's with me, and I know that there are ways that he does try to communicate with me. I know that I can talk with him, and I believe he can hear me. And I just think it's really important for people to know that your loved one doesn't die as in the end of their entire existence. It's just not true. And I'd been thinking about that quite a bit, how much I just disdain that word dead, because it's the wrong word to describe what happens. And my last, I just wanted to start off with that. And then in my last video, I started to talk about how Richard knew how to do just about everything. He knew how to fix things on the ranch, and he was a brilliant lawyer. He knew how to figure things out legally, whatever, even the most complicated legal problems he knew how to figure out. He learned on hands-on experience and by reading how to fix things himself And he learned how to be independent in that way, so he didn't have to call on other people to fix things. He learned how to do it himself. But the one thing, and this is what I was getting at my last video, the one thing that he didn't know how to do, at least not very well, was to keep his room clean. And I used to be able to go in and clean things for him because he just didn't know how to do it. It's the one thing that he just didn't know how to do. And I mean, even a small thing. Okay, I used to get on him for after we'd have dinner, and he'd rinse out his bowl, his favorite bowl that he'd, whatever dinner I made, he had, his favorite black bowl that he would eat from. And I would check his bowl, and I'd say, Richard, I always called him Bear because we were bears. He was a grizzly bear, and I'm the polar bear. And I rarely called him by his name, except when something really serious came up. And then I would say, Richard, this is important. But most of the time I just called him Bear. And I'd say, Bear, I got to show you this. And I'd show him his bowl, and I said, you can't just take water and rinse it out and then put it on the dish rack. Take a look. You see all this, left in your bowl, there's some food that's left there. And, you kind of look at it and go, oh, And I would say, you have to take the sponge and you have to, wash it out good, because just rinsing it out with water, it's not going to do it. And, then the food is left in there, and that can become bacteria, and it's not good for you. But it's just, simple things like that. He just didn't know how to really get in there and clean, well. And that's one thing that I am good at. I guess it comes from my parents, maybe my Swedish background or something. I don't know. But so I felt really, really sad because he was very private about his room. And he didn't really want me to go in his room. I would say, Richard, just let me go in and clean it for you. No, he'd say, no, I can do it. I can do it. And I knew that he couldn't. And that was like the one thing in the world that he just couldn't do well. And so then after he died, I went into his room, and there were a lot of things that just needed to be cleaned. Really, it was pretty bad, and I just feel so sad that I didn't insist on it, because he was pretty stubborn about letting anybody in his room. It was very private to him, and I would say to him, just why don't you go do something for a few hours and just let me go in and give it a good cleaning. And he'd always say, no, it's okay, I can do it. I got the stuff to clean it. And I kept the rest of the house clean, but he was just very stubborn and private about his own room. And when I went in, and I worked really hard to clean it after he died, and I got it clean from top to bottom, but it took a long time for me to get it back the way it should have been for him when he was alive. And I just feel so sad. My heart just was breaking when I was cleaning, and I just kept saying to him, Richard, damn it, you should have just let me do it for you. You should not have been sleeping in this room the way it is. I mean, there were a lot of cobwebs that he never knocked down. I know that he was very sensitive about the spiders, and I am too. I don't kill them. They're friendly little spiders. They're not anything dangerous. But when I see spiders, I usually just gently grab them and throw their little asses outside where they belong. And some of them can stay, but I keep up on, I don't want to be a whole bunch of spider webs everywhere. And there were spider webs and, dust that had accumulated, and it wasn't a very good scene, and it really broke my heart because he should not have been living and sleeping in that room like that. And I kept saying to him, it was like one of these things where you want to go back and make it right and say the right things that you didn't do. And I was thinking I should have just put my foot down and just say, I am not taking no for an answer. You go, and if you have to, sleep downstairs until I'm done, use your bathroom or whatever, but sleep downstairs until I get done cleaning your room. And I never did that. I wasn't persistent enough. And I think if I had been, he would have said, okay, I don't know, it's hard to say with him because he was so private, but he might have been saying no because he was embarrassed. He didn't want me to see how bad it got. And it really hurt my feelings, to see that he should not have been living in his room with it not being clean the way it should have been. And so I spent a lot of time. I'd take a couple hours and work on it in one section at a time, and then I'd take a break for a few days, and then I'd go back and work some more, couple hours, and I just kept doing it like a project, so to speak, a house project. And I got it, where it's just beautiful now. Every little inch, every corner of that room is clean. Everything in that room is clean, including his old record player that he had, and his speakers. And I cleaned it all, every little inch. It's just, the room came out so beautiful. And I was thinking, if only if only I had done this when he was alive, and it would have made him so happy. It would have made him really happy to have his room like that, back the way it should be, nice and clean. And it was hard for me to go through and see all the things that he had. So many things that were just so precious. He had his guitar that he used to sit down and play these little notes, and I used to listen to it. He wasn't like, a guitarist or anything, but he used to just play these soft notes, and they were very gentle, and I enjoyed listening to it. It was very calming. And, I went through and I looked at all of his books on his bookshelves, and just beautiful books. A lot of them very heavy, spiritual books, philosophy books, and also just spiritual books from Krishnamurti and Rajneesh, and then the ancient Greeks, and also legal books, a lot of legal books, since he was a lawyer. But the way I look at it now is that I know, just as I said, there's no such thing as dead. That's just it. There's no such thing as a person being completely dead and non-existent. And I believe that he is seeing his room, and that he sees how beautiful it is. And I wanted to clean it and make it beautiful for him. I was doing it for him, even though he's not in his physical body anymore. I did it for him, and to me, it's kind of like an offering to him. You know how in certain cultures, even people lay out certain foods that are an offering. Of course, they're not going to physically come back and eat the food, but it's an offering, and it's like a memorial. And by having his room really nice and clean, I look at it like, this is my offering to you, and this is, a memorial. This whole room is a memorial to you now, and I will continue to keep it nice and clean. And I put his favorite blanket, his favorite Indian blanket on his bed, and I put one of my favorite stuffed bears on there, a grizzly bear. And it's just really beautiful the way it came out. And I guess, these are the things that you have to go through when your loved one leaves. And I saw all of his clothes, and I thought, I remember when I was cleaning my mom's house and getting it back in order and nice and clean, and I thought to myself, and this is, a few years ago. No, well, not a few. It was, I was there June 2024, and it was before Richard died. And I was, having to get rid of a lot of, give away a lot of clothes. And my friend that was helping me, Katina, I said, I don't understand why my mom kept all of Jim's clothes, everything. I mean, she didn't even want to give away his ties, his shirts, they're all here. And, you would think at some point she would, pack some of these things up and give them to Goodwill or, people that could use them. And it wasn't until after Richard died that I completely understand now why she didn't. Because I see all of his clothes, his coats and everything in his closet, and his favorite shirts, his navy blue shirts, and his jeans, and his sweat pants, his navy blue sweatpants, and there's just no way that I can give those away. I can't. I just can't. And I just, pack, neatly fold them, and I'm just keeping them there. And I realized, now I know why my mom couldn't do it, because it's like those clothes are just another way of kind of holding on to that person. And not in a bad way. I don't mean like holding on attached, where you're trying to bring... I'm not trying to bring Richard's soul down. I know that he is on God's path and fulfilling whatever God's journey has for him. But I just mean that it's a way of just being close to them. And I didn't understand that when I saw all those clothes and everything that my mom kept from her husband. And it just, I realized, now I know why she just couldn't even though it would have been a nice thing to do, to pack up clothes that were not being used at all. They were just being in the closet, and people can use nice clothes, at charities and so on. But I understand now, because I feel the same way. I just can't. I can't do that. And again, I'm reminded of, Joan Didion's book, Magical Thinking, when she finally had to sort things out and was packing things that she thought about giving to a charity from her husband that passed away. And she lived with her husband for nearly half a century. They were together, same with me and Richard. And as she was sorting things out in the closet, she thought to herself about his shoes, and she said, how can I give away his shoes? What happens if he comes back? He's going to need them. And that was the line that gave her the title of the book, Magical Thinking. And I think we all fall into that as we're going through a grieving and losing the one that we love. We somewhere, in our hearts, we just want them to come back. And but I want to emphasize for those who are experiencing loss of a loved one that they're not dead, okay? That is the wrong word to use, because it conveys that they're no longer exist at all, and it is just the opposite. It's just the contrary. I know that they're far more alive, far more aware, and far more happier, in God's eternal love, and they can be with us. You just have to have faith in that, and you don't have to necessarily ask for proof, like little signs. Like sometimes I do ask Richard, please give me a little sign, that you're with me, telepathically, or, even if it's just some little sign, I'm always looking for the signs. But I know that in my heart, he's with me. And they have to go on to whatever it is that God wants them to do according to God's will. But that doesn't mean that they're not aware of what we're doing. It doesn't mean that they're not with us. And so forget about that word dead, okay? it just, knock it out of your vocabulary, because it's not true. Okay. Have a good one, everyone. Have a good day.